RWBY Volume 8, Episode 2, Refuge. So, this episode I got to see after being insanely tired. Dad stuff. My mom came to visit us and she left her keys. I had to wake up at like 8 in the morning just to drive her to get some keys. So, I actually stopped by my apartment and I fell asleep for like 4 hours. However long it is from 10 to 1. I don't care to do the math right now. But, this is like the first actual thing I've done all day and it's like 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So, I watched RWBY and it was a good episode. It was okay. I shouldn't say it was like a good episode. It was alright. Like, the ending was good. And there's like 2 other moments that made me laugh. So, and, it was just okay. It was alright. So, of course, we have our teams. They're still split up. We didn't really get too much out of this episode except focusing on Yang's team. Like, they kind of split. I thought it was going to really go back and forth, but obviously the main focus of this episode was, Yang's side of the adventure. And I like the way it was handled. Like, there are some small things here and there that I thought were interesting that they didn't do a ton with. But, once again, a lot like the first episode where that was kind of like, oh, here's kind of this element of what's to come. This episode, I think, did that just a tiny bit. Like, they showed a little bit of, like, the added tension of the characters, specifically with Ren. Like, that was, I think, the main focus, even out of that team. Ren's feelings of how he's trying to deal with his relationship with Nora, and is like, I don't need a pep talk, I just need to focus, and he's like, he's doing kind of the introvert thing, where it's like, he's forced to deal with the extra stuff. He doesn't have, like, that energy level right now. Like, his energy's been all used up, but he has to deal with it because they're in an emergency situation. So, I like the way it was handled. And it's like, okay, they pulled off the evacuation of the people. They had the old lady who was complaining, like, I don't want to, be in the slums with, the animals, like her whole thing. This is super random, but she reminded me of that boy. Like, if you've seen The Walking Dead, you probably know what I'm talking about. She reminded me of that boy that didn't shut up and got a bunch of people killed. She reminded me of him because I thought some stuff was about to go down because she wouldn't shut up and that would distract Ren, and then there would be absolute chaos and like they would actually lose people, which I think that should happen. As much as it sucks to have people die off, there's like a trillion random people, they can kill somebody off. I think that would work. I think that works for the show because they don't really have to deal with that too often. Like, they lose, but it's like, oh man, we lost on this insanely grand scale. Like, we lost the entire effing town because a dragon came in. Like, crazy stuff like that. It's not like they were doing a mission and then just, people just die here and there. Like, we have it where it's main characters, so of course that leads us to Crow and Robin and the 2 douchebags. Not much happened there. Like, they showed them. I was hoping we'd get more out of that, if I'm being totally honest, especially with the end of that scene being Arthur actually being taken out, which was one of the parts that made me laugh because he's like, you already called me, and then they just hit him in the face. I just laughed out loud because I didn't see that coming, and it was super funny to me. So I like that scene. That was really funny. But we had our 4 characters. They're all locked up, and it's just like, okay, that's kind of the dynamic that we have. Funny moment, and then Crow is like, there is something that we can do, and now he wants to kill Ironwood. I don't think that's going to happen. I hope it doesn't. I mentioned before, I'm still on Ironwood's side. Like, they're the ones that were screwing everything up going through. And once again, not to harp on this, but Crow was being dumb. Everybody was being dumb in that fight. Like, every single person, except for Tyrion, did something stupid in that fight. So, I mean, everybody's like, Ironwood's that dude. And it's like, you guys have had, like, to go with, a fairy tale, breadcrumbs of bullshit, just all the way up to this moment of just dumb ideas. So this is, I'm still just like, Ironwood's doing some wild stuff, but he's not really doing the worst stuff. He's not just being straight up dumb. So I'm like, okay, let's see how it plays out. So they're still in prison, except for Arthur, who's taken somewhere. I was hoping we'd actually see what happened with him, so unfortunately we'll have to wait until next week. Then we have, of course, the rest of the team. As far as RWBY and her side of things, they go to another building owned by the Schnee Dust Company, which I thought was a funny moment. That was like a minor funny moment. It's like, is there a building your family doesn't own? But new headcanon, we need R.I.P. Weiss. She's dead because Nora hit that button and her body just snapped. Like, she's dead. That was the second thing that made me laugh. And I'm like, it made me think of Futurama at first. I was like, oh, that's cool. It was like the tubes in Futurama. And then Nora actually hit the button. And then Weiss just got sucked into the air, and I was like, she's dead now. And you can't tell me I'm wrong, technically speaking. She's dead. Like, her body just snapped in half, and the force of that, as she was sitting sideways and then just got sucked like this, she's dead. Like, she's dead now. So, R.I.P. Weiss. But that was a funny moment, because I'm like, that's a Nora thing to do. She was just like, oh, okay, just boop. And I was like, wow, that's effed up. I don't even, like, that scene went so fast, I forgot what the plan was, because that happened. It just shocked me, and I was like, I don't even actually know if they told us where they were going. They probably did. I'm sure they did, because like the Hunters mentioned, like, having her camouflage ability and stuff. So I'm sure they said where they were going, but that just threw out like the whole thing. I was like, dang, like, I don't know if it gets them directly to the arena or anything, but I was just like, man, that just messed me up. Like, the whole scene was just like, oh, that's all I can think of now is like, Nor hit that button and Weiss is dead now. But that's all we got at that side of the team because this focused on, Yang and her team. They got their motorcycles. They had that little moment, which was, I think, like the very first tease that we even got for this volume was, her on the motorcycle. So we got that scene. On the little bridge was a Grimm, which of course we'll get to at the very end of the episode. So I definitely noticed that. I was like, oh, that's the Grimm that's, tracking them down. So it's like, that's really cool because it was like just a quick glance. And it was also in the scene with the dragon. It was still on a bridge. I don't know if that was, I would assume it's a different bridge, but it was on the bridge and it like ran off the bridge before the dragon hit it. So I was like, okay, there's, that Grimm is already following them. So I thought that was cool. It's already looking for Oscar. We get to see Fiona. I thought that was pretty cool. I didn't realize that was her ability where she has like her own, she has, I didn't bother looking it up because you'll get the reference, but Jimmy Neutron, when he had that little box that was like an alternate dimension, that's her thing. So I was like, that's super cool. That's a great ability to have. You're just like, boom, it's on me, and just boom, and you just have it. I was like, that's a cool ability. So I'd love to see how that plays out. Action wise, we probably won't see that too much because she's in like leader mode, which I thought was cool. So she's taking over for Robin. And I like the fact that the Huntresses are actually getting a lot to do. Like, I don't know their names yet. I only know Fiona because they kept saying her name. But the taller woman, she pushed the dude out of the way and, like, gave the rousing speech to the city. Like, hey, this is what's happening. Like, if you want to be safe, do this. So they were all getting a nice piece of the puzzle this time. Because last time, it was like, okay, cool. They show up. They're, the Huntresses. Like, that's pretty cool. But other than that, they were just kind of there when Robin showed up. And she was, like, the focus. Until now, they get to actually help the city, and we see them, how they operate without their leader. So I was like, that's cool. I like that dynamic. I hope we do get to see more of that, because I like the characters, and they are definitely the heroes. So I want to see kind of how that dynamic plays out. Fiona mentioned to Yang, was like, I was kind of doubting you guys could do it without your whole team. And Ren just straight up turned around. Like, he turned around and just walked away. I was like, I'm out of this conversation because I'm already mad. And then, of course, Yang got upset. I was like, well, clearly we have it handled. So I don't know how much they're going to come up against that on both sides of the fence, like Yang's team as well as Ruby's team. But I'd like to see it. I'd like to see what happens. I want to see them run into other characters. Like, if Team Funky runs into, whoever, I want to see everyone's ideas. Like, oh, you guys split up. Like, who do they feel, is more equipped to be a leader? I would love to see that concept because everybody has to have their ideas. Like, oh, okay, Yang is kind of like this, even though they don't know him that well. They know him well enough to be like, all right, here's everyone's personalities, and here's the the split teams that we have. What does everyone think when they come across Yang's team versus Ruby's team? I want to know that dynamic. I think that would kind of help with the flow of this season. So I hope we get that. I'm not 100% sure we will, but I'd like to see it. I think that would be cool. So we had our stalker. I'm just like, they call it a hound. I think they call it a Crimson Hound actually, which is a great name. I just called it a Hellhound because I was like, this is just like, it was great. I love that sequence. The fight was cool. They took out the dragon. It was like, oh, that's neat. They used the motorcycle. Jean also has like little grenade shields now to kind of be the projectile version of the shield that he already has on him. I was like, okay, that's cool. He likes that more than the motorcycle. That makes perfect sense. Then we have our end fight scene. They take out this dragon, and then they just get swarmed, and they just get destroyed. Like, this thing comes down, and I was like, okay, this is fun. I like the whole scene. Like, the whole scene I thought was great. I was like, if we could have just had like 5 extra minutes of that, it just, I don't know what you could cut out. I think that they had a good, like, everything was good in this episode. Before I talk about that, one other important moment was Oscar actually talking to Ozpin, and he mentioned, like, my favorite thing at the end of that was like, I don't want our souls to be one. And I was like, that's kind of interesting. I never considered that. Like, I always thought, when he says something like that, where it's like, our souls actually become one, does that erase Oscar? Because I never got that feeling. I always thought it was literally just like, this is how it is. Like, the person chooses. Like, they go back and forth. And, of course, the last guy was like, all right, no big deal. You go ahead and take over. But the way they kind of made it seem, and maybe they have mentioned this and I just forgot it, and this kind of reinforced it, but I never got that feeling before where it was Ozpin will eventually just completely take over. And even their souls becoming one, I feel like that still creates the fact that, even if it's one, it's still 2 consciousnesses coming into one soul. 2 minds, there it is. That's what I should have gone with. But it was interesting. Just the way they said it, I was like, oh, I never really felt their connection to be like that. Like, I know that it's supposed to be like Oscar, of course, as he goes along, he gets more of Ozpin's memories and stuff like that, which they even reference. But I never felt the way that they said, just them saying, like, eventually our souls become one. I was like, huh, Ozpin is the stronger of the two, technically speaking, would that erase Oscar? And I don't think it does, because I think that's almost the whole point, is that they still have to work together in order for that to happen. But, you know, like the whole conversation was like, I started to feel like myself, and then you came back. I was like, I just never looked at their situation in that way. I always thought it was eventually they become one, but they still choose to become one. And the way that they had that conversation, it almost felt like, oh yeah, Oscar's getting all these memories and it's by force. You know, he's not choosing to be like, let me just unlock this memory. Like, it just happens automatically. And it does kind of make it feel like everything that Ozpin has done is just going to eventually take over Oscar. And that's just kind of like the way that conversation went. And I was like, man, I never really looked at it in that way. So I did enjoy that. But unfortunately, them having that very unique connection is what led them to all get absolutely whooped by this Crimson Hound. And it was great. Like I said, I love the scene. Like, he comes down, he just stomps on him, boom, stomps on him again, and he takes his Zora out. He's completely unconscious. I was like, this is effed up. And so then, of course, they're trying to shoot, and he's waving Oscar around as a shield. And so Yang tries to go in, she stops, and then he just gets her by the face, throws her into a wall, and it's like, what is that? Like, he's using Oscar as a shield. It's like, Grimm aren't that smart. And so, he's blocking and pointing around. Ren tries to go in with the slick move, and then it just, basically, it morphs. Like, every little thing, it morphs. And so it just makes, like, a nice little rubber arm and just get out of my face. And then we had a great moment. And it's like, people always talk to things that never talk back. That's, like, a classic thing of zombie games and just anything. It's like, don't move. Like, idiots. That's what happens. In this case, it was a passionate plea from Ren. It's just like, give him back. Like, we want our friend back. And so then this little thing morphs in esophagus and vocal cords is like, no. And I wrote down right here, this is some Attack on Titan shit. And I loved it. That was a great scene. I knew why it was possible because, of course, it was chosen to be able to do that by Salem. But I didn't see it coming. And I loved it. This is some Attack on Titan shit. And it was great. It was just a great scene. And it threw everybody off. And then, of course, it grew wings. And then it just takes off. So now we have our, Yang team was like, all right, well, we have to get to Oscar, which I don't know if they'll be able to pull that off. I feel like this is a perfect opportunity to have, like, Team Funky, someone else come in to actually assist them. Who knows where Team Funky actually is right now? But this seems like the perfect opportunity because none of them are really aerial characters. Like, the only thing Ren could do would be, like, shoot the blade of his gun and try to go up. But none of those characters are actual, like, aerial fighters. Like, they need other people. Like, Weiss would be good in this situation. RWBY would be good in this situation. Penny would be good in this situation. And Blake would be okay in this situation. So they're definitely on, like, the wrong team to deal with this issue at the moment, which I think was probably done on purpose. So that's a great idea to be like, all right, this is the team that is not equipped to do it. So if they end up rescuing him, I assume that it'll be even cooler to watch them succeed because it's like, okay, it's easy if it's, Weiss and RWBY and the flying robot Penny, who is also a maiden at this point. So that's like the easy route. Now you have all the ground characters and it's like, what the F are we supposed to do except follow this thing on motorcycles and hope it doesn't fly higher into the air, which I assume it will. So we might not even get an answer to that in the next episode. We should, because that's very important. So I hope that they don't mess with our heads. And it's like, let's focus all on RWBY and whatever Arthur's dealing with, and nothing about Oscar being kidnapped by a flying crimson hellhound. So I love the ending. I can't wait to see what we get next. I feel like they're going to do the classic thing, because they do this a lot with RWBY, where it's like, here's this really cool thing that should definitely be like, boom, we're moving along, and then it doesn't happen. Also, I will note this, however. I didn't expect this to happen so soon, because I was like, okay, she sends the thing out, oh, it's tracking them. I was like, oh, that's cool, like, the thing's tracking them. It's going to be like another 2.5 episodes before it attacks. And I was like, we saw it, it was like your little glimpse, and it didn't matter if you didn't catch it, because it attacked at the end of the episode. And I was like, I'm super happy. I mentioned that in the last volume. Sometimes when they just do things fast, I'm like, that's all I want. Like, don't make us wait 2 episodes when it's like, this should really be taken care of immediately, and we should see everything that's happening as it happens. So I'm excited that happened. I'm very glad it happened. Hopefully, they don't F with us and give us like 2 minutes of that, because that's way more important than anything that's about to happen. Like, it doesn't matter who RWBY's team runs into. It's not going to be as important as Oscar was kidnapped and being taken to Salem. Like, nothing is as important as that right now. Unfortunately, we all know we're going to be getting a bunch of other stuff in the next episode, but I really hope that either it's a long episode, next week, and they just do it like that, which I doubt, or they just focus on this storyline more than the other storyline, and then once that's handled, either they lose them or they actually get them, which, I don't know. I kind of want them to lose them, because then at least things are shaken up. I'm just like, he was kidnapped. That's cool. But I want like a real shakeup. I want them to be like, we could not rescue him. He was taken to Salem, and then we see what happens next. That's kind of what I want, because I'm like, shake things up, destroy things, like make things chaotic. Because as of now, it's nice dynamic. The teams are split up, but it's always pretty safe in this show, and I don't like that. I don't want it to be safe. Like it's not the end game. It's not the final season, but we're in a version of an end game. Like something's got to go down here. We need some big stuff. So I kind of hope they don't get to rescue him, and I just want to see what happens next. But I would love to know what you guys thought about this one, so please put your comments down in the comment section below. Let me know your favorite parts, your least favorite parts. Do you want Oscar to get rescued? Do you not want him to get rescued? What are your theories on how that's going to play out? Where do you think Arthur's going? What do you think is going to happen with Crow? Crow and Robin teaming up, if they actually... Who knows? That fight can end up being the exact same way, and it's like, we're kind of teaming up. We kind of want to kill you, Ironwood, and it's like... Who the F knows what'll happen there? We'll see, I guess. I'm still just like, every time somebody's mad at Ironwood, I'm like, you guys remember, for them, I mean, literally, it was, 12 hours ago? I'm like, you guys remember when the sun was up, like, coming up, which is the beginning of the day that you're living right now, and you were dumb? All of that stuff. So, I'm still mad at, like, everybody that's not Ironwood. Every time they talk about Ironwood being, like, the big bad, I'm like, those little breadcrumbs of shit. That was them. Just, that's personal opinion. I'm just saying, they're still kind of irritating me. Being like, it's all that dude. And it's like, is it though? Is it the one guy, or is it like the dozen people that made a decision? Just saying. I'm just saying. But we'd love to know your thoughts on this. Theories, hopes, dreams, all that good stuff. So please put your comments down in the comment section below. And of course, thanks for watching.